Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining Hashtag No Limits. I am your host, Shelley Kino, and Hashtag No Limits is about people whose society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet that we know who we are, but not who we will be. And I believe that to be absolutely true. And I believe that there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells and then reforms into the butterfly. And then it has to struggle to get out of the cocoon in order to be able to fly, in order for its wings to be strong enough for it to be able to fly. And that cannot be an easy task, but neither can busting through the limits that society has placed upon a person. And today, my guest is Don Guenther, and he has a couple of things that he is going to talk to us about. One, he's going to tell us about his daughter, Courtney, and then he's also going to be talking with us about an industry called Lafayette Industries and the great work that they are doing. So, Don, thank you for joining me today, and welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So tell me, as I said, you're going to tell us about your daughter, Courtney, but tell us about your family. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I was going to say there's more than just Courtney. I have three daughters. Courtney happens to be the youngest. My oldest is in the New York City area working at a public company, and my middle one is in Nashville. Both are very successful. And Courtney has been at Lafayette Industries, which we'll talk about, for 8 years now, and has done very well there.
Awesome. And so what do you do for your business, or what, for, on your day-to-day job?
Yeah, I actually do two things. I'm a little schizophrenic. I work for a company called Technology Partners. We do IT staffing, and then we do web and mobile applications. And then they've been gracious enough to allow me to help Lafayette Industries. Their salesperson retired after 24 years, and I'm helping them put in some processes and procedures and button up their sales effort a little bit.
Awesome. Fabulous. All right. So tell us about Courtney. And I believe you said that she changed your world completely, and you learned things that you never knew you needed to know.
Sure. When you have babies, the first thing you do is count the toes and fingers and appendages and make sure everything's there. And Courtney was a beautiful baby, born in the middle of the night. And we have a program in the St. Louis area called Parents as Teachers. And they come to your house and help you be a better parent. Well, Sue, the PAT resource, had noticed a couple of things about Courtney. She had some oral apraxia, which means she didn't speak as clearly as she should. And she had some pronation of her feet, which means her feet were pointed a little bit inward. So she told us that at a very early age that we should maybe have those things looked at. And it turned out that when Courtney was about 18 months old, she was diagnosed as mentally impaired. And that sort of changed our world. At that time, I was a high-flying, highly regarded executive at Monsanto and had the world by the tail. And, when a parent gets a diagnosis that your child is not typical, it throws a little curveball at you. And I'll tell you, I actually had a quote-unquote friend who sort of defriended us because we had a less than perfect child. So, you just see a bunch of weird things, okay?
Yeah. And, that really saddens me, first of all. But because of something like that is one of the reasons that I started this program, because Sure. I'm trying to get the perspective of people with all different levels of abilities out in people's minds so that they can appreciate the differences and be willing to open their hearts and their lives and maybe their homes to someone who is different than them in some way. My specific focus is somebody who learns differently, who has a disability, special needs, whatever. I know there's so many terms, and some people are happy with some terms and some aren't. And so I try to say them all to cover everybody or offend everybody, whichever way it happens to go. Yeah. I really try to help it be reaching everybody. But that's just heartbreaking. And what that person missed out on is almost more heartbreaking, because they missed out on spending time with you and your wife and your family, and just, having their own perspectives broadened.
But you know what? The problem is that when we see children with various situations, a lot of us don't know, and I have, because I've been now involved in that world 26 years. But a lot of us don't know how to react and what to say or what to do or this or that. And it's really interesting. When Courtney went into kindergarten, her kindergarten teacher was teacher of the year the prior year. And we're not going to use any names today, but
Right.
It was really interesting that teacher of the year did an abysmal job at servicing my child. She was very good with typical kids or maybe high performing kids, but our child was a quote unquote nuisance in her world because she required special attention. But the path through the school system was mixed. Any parent with a child with special needs knows what an IEP is, and we would leave the IEP annually, and my wife would be crying because, in my opinion, the school system, their objective was to minimize the amount of services that your child would get, and our job was to be an advocate for our child and try to get as many services. And our daughter responded very positively to music therapy, and we had to fight to get that. And then we ended up putting her in the Suzuki violin program, and she did pretty well. Sat next to the rest of the kids and did okay. Mm-hmm. So, I've found over the years that you need to let these children work and do things and fail just like the rest of us. And you'd be surprised at how these kiddos can perform.
Absolutely. And, you hit on my other business that I do, which is, well, it's actually my business. This is for fun. But my business is going with parents to those IEP meetings, helping parents through the special education process, because as a former special education teacher, I saw tons of parents leaving meetings like your wife. And I didn't want it to be that way, because I wanted to be somebody who was, as a special education teacher, I felt like that was part of my role, was to make sure that, everybody was on the same page and that everybody was understanding, and to try to lessen the pain that those meetings caused so many parents. And there's, as I said, lessen it, because IEP meetings, unfortunately, you have those because there is something that your child has a deficit in. And so the reason for the individualized education program, or IEP, is in order to help them have that specially designed instruction that they need. So yes, it is unfortunate that we have to talk about negative things, but there's so many positive things. Sure. And we get so focused in those meetings because that's the kind of the main point, that oftentimes we forget to tell parents, your child is amazing and your child is able to do blah, 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 blah. But the focus of this meeting has to be this. And I think if we can start meetings that way more often, that will help parents for maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you had a different experience, but in those meetings, it always seemed that the parents felt like all the teachers and all the schools saw about the child was negatives.
I wouldn't say in every case. The kindergarten situation was like that. And one other thing I want to clarify too, my wife, there is no woman in the world, and I'll even throw Shania Twain into this category, that I would rather have be the mother of my child with special needs than Debbie, because she's just a absolutely organized person. And you really have to be organized as you go through this thing. There are so many hurdles and, Social Security and guardianship and trusts and different things that you have to fight through. And that's what I would encourage parents of children with special needs is there's a community of families that have these children, and you need to share experiences. And for example, if you're in St. Louis, Tom Zotto is the best lawyer for guardianship. Bhavik Patel is the best lawyer for setting up trusts. You need to know when to do what and how to set things up. And it's just crazy. So,
Yeah. And there were some of the things that you just mentioned, the guardianship, the trusts. Those were things that, as a special education teacher, I had no idea about. My students, they left me by the time they were going into high school, or at the time they were going into high school. So I didn't have any concept of the transition that happens after high school, and then all of that type of planning. And my book, Those Who Can't Teach, I found that out, and there were several families that I spoke with that are in the book that had to go through and are going through continually that guardianship process. And that was kind of one of the ideas that when I learned of, I thought, this is something that I don't think about. It's not something you thought about with your two older daughters.
Right.
But because you want to protect Courtney and she's not necessarily able to protect herself in every way that your other daughters are able to, then you have to do that guardianship. And I've had a couple of shows where we've talked about that specifically. So I'm not going to take your time today because I know your time is short and precious, and I want to really hone in on the important things for you. But for anybody who's watching who's never heard of that before, please be sure to look up, if you have a child with special needs, what guardianship is. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that's entailed with that. And then the same with the special needs trusts, or supplemental needs trusts, as my friend Eric Westacott calls it. And I'm sorry, but I had to give him a plug too, because I think he's an amazing lawyer who does those special needs trusts. So, and then Dennis Farrar is a friend who does a lot with the pre-planning and the kind of more the financial aspects of it. But yeah, make sure that if you have a child with pretty significant special needs, that you definitely are checking into those kinds of things, because those are really necessary steps to take. So,
yeah, especially when if you don't take care of that before they turn 18, legally, they really have the right and authority to make decisions on their own, even if they can't make decisions on their own. So it can put you in a bad place. And then Social Security disability is another thing that you need to do at the same time. And, it all weaves into one another, if you will.
Yeah. And that's part of why I wanted to write the book that I did, because your story for Courtney is so much different in a lot of ways, and than your story with your first two daughters and my own story with my daughter, that I felt it was necessary to put that out there. Because while there are tons and tons of similarities, your mindset, I believe, has to be different when you're thinking about how you're dealing with Courtney than how you're dealing with your two older daughters. Is that true?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Courtney has really been a blessing as far as boys who have dated my older daughters, because if you have a young man who can't handle the situation with Courtney, then you certainly don't want them dating your daughter. And my middle daughter's married, and she married a young man, and he called me to ask for her hand. And when I talked to him, I said, "Now you know that Courtney is part of the family." And he said, "Yes, sir, I do." And I said, "I don't know what that means, but she's part of the family." And he's been absolutely terrific. So I'd say we have a pretty strong positive filter in our family for any boys that hang around my other daughters.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's an excellent point, actually. So what kinds of things specifically that you can recall during the time that she was going through school, or at any point in Courtney's life, really, were those societal limits placed upon her that she has busted through?
Yeah. So, probably one of the most surprising places, I taught confirmation to all three of our daughters, helping or leading, and relay the story when Courtney went into confirmation, the first class. The pastor asked everybody to find a partner, and so everybody grabbed somebody. And there was one child when the dust settled that didn't have a partner, and that was my daughter. And one of the other helpers saw that and was aghast and grabbed Courtney. But I would tell you what I did was I developed an adapted curriculum for Courtney in the confirmation program in the church. And she took a test at the end, and she passed the test. And so I would tell you that you'd be surprised how much these kids pick up on. They pick up on emotion. They pick up on sadness. I actually had a situation years ago where I lost my job, and I was sitting there in the kitchen table feeling sorry for myself, and I hear these footsteps walking down the stairs and down the hall, and it's Courtney, and she hops in my lap and says, "Daddy, I love you." And I realized that she didn't care whether or not I had a job or not. All she cared was that I was there for her. And I would say that what I see in children with special needs, I believe it's the closest thing that we'll see to God on this earth.
That's beautiful. Just thinking about it's tearing me up, just thinking about her coming and telling you that, because that was, like you said, she probably, I don't know how old she was at the time, but she probably knew that something was off with you. And that was her way to say, Daddy, I'm here for you. I'm caring for you. Yeah. Everything's going to be okay.
And it positively impacted my older daughters when they were in their 8 to 10 to 11 area. I used to take the two older girls to what we called sport day. We'd get to choose a sport, and we'd do the sport that the kid wanted to do, and then we'd go for ice cream afterwards. Well, the girls were getting old enough to where I wanted to start talking to them, and I said to the girls, they were in the back seat of the car, I said, girls, you're going to have friends at school who, when they see Courtney, they will not understand why she's the way she is. And I said, in fact, sometimes I don't know why she's the way she is. And my older daughter, Jennifer, spoke up. She said, I know why Courtney's the way she is. I said, why is that? And she said, so that we can see people that are different and know that they're important and how to treat them.
Wow. Out of the mouths of babes. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she actually applied to Harvard Business School, and one of her essays was on her sister Courtney, and she got into Harvard Business School, and I believe because of her story about Courtney.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's such, oh my gosh, your stories are breaking my heart today. Yeah. And I so appreciate your willingness to share those, because, I think going back to, the person who kind of stopped being your friend and then the confirmation story, we need to do a better job of, with our own children, directly teaching, hey, if someone has differences from you, that's all they are. That doesn't determine who the person is. You can still be that person's friend. Like you take the time, get to know that person, be nice to them, go up to them. Yes, it might be uncomfortable. Yes, it might be awkward, but take the time and do it. And I think we really need to directly teach our children that acceptance. I think sometimes we sort of think somehow they just get it from us.
I'd expand your comment to, I think we also need to teach adults, because you'd be surprised how insensitive adults could be. And in the workplace, whenever I hear the word retarded, I don't like that word. So I gently tell people that they have to be careful how they describe certain situations. So, but I'll tell you another story. Courtney and I were at the zoo a couple of years ago, and we were in big cat country walking over towards the zebras. And I said to Courtney, Courtney, look at the gazelles. And she said, Daddy, those aren't gazelles, those are addixes. Now, I know everybody that would be watching this would say, you don't know the difference between a gazelle and an addix, right? Well, Courtney does. She knows most animals, where they live, who their enemies are, what they eat, what their babies are called, what their groups are called. And that's just her area. Now, if you ask Courtney to take this book that I have here and put it on the counter downstairs, it may end up in, wherever. But it goes back to your point of, I think we need to look into what people can be and are as opposed to what they aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. You told me a story once before about, speaking of the zoo, about Courtney and zoo books.
Yeah, we were at the zoo. She loves zoo books, and we were there trying to buy her a zoo book, and they discontinued them, and she was very upset. I said, Courtney, when we get home, we can look for them in the computer. So we drove home, and of course, Dad forgot about that. And about 15 or 20 minutes later, Courtney called me, and she had pulled up zoo books on the computer and found the page for the book that she wanted to buy. So we we bought the books and clicked send, and then she got up and walked out on the front porch and waited for them to be delivered, right? So, again, very highly functional in some areas and challenging in other areas. But I would tell you that I think us typical people are maybe highly functional in some areas and are really challenged in other areas. I think my wife would tell you that for sure.
Oh, I absolutely think that. I mean, not any of us is knowledgeable in every subject, in every person, in everything that there is to know. I mean, I didn't know after I not after I published it, but as I was writing my book, all the steps that are involved in that process and the editing process and the publishing process. And I'm still learning stuff about that. And then I think about pretty much any industry. Nobody that's not in that industry understands like the ones who are in it.
Right.
And so every one of us has strengths and every one of us has weaknesses. And unfortunately, like I said, those IEP meetings specifically are designed to talk about, hey, how are we going to shore up these deficits? And we forget to mention all the positives that are involved. So again, I know that your time is precious today. So I want to talk about now that Courtney is an adult, and you said that she works for Lafayette Industries and that you are also working with them. So tell us about that and tell us kind of what they do and all that stuff.
So, when children get out of high school, they have the option to keep attending for a little while. But after a certain point, at age 21, they do what I call drop off the cliff. There's just not a lot of options. Now, they did make available a work program where we could have dropped her off at one of the large local hospitals, and she would have had to make her way down into the bowels of the building to the cafeteria and work there until after lunch, and then go 2 buildings over to another building and then go back out front to be picked up at the end of the day. Challenge with that is we had a situation at a community college where a young lady of typical nature got pushed into a bathroom and raped. And we our number one concern for Courtney has always been safety. So Lafayette Industries is one of, I think there are about 83 work shops in Missouri. It's the largest sheltered workshop in Missouri. We employ 411 people with special needs. Courtney is one of those at 2 locations. And Courtney was able to apply and go to work there. Lafayette Industries does what I would call light assembly, packing, co-packing, and some refurbishing of product. For instance, if you drink Fitz's root beer and you ever buy the mixed 6-packs of sodas, our workers do that. They mix up the sodas in the 6-packs. We do a lot of retail products that are clamshell that have the plastic with the product and then a cardboard backer. There's one product we're making for Target that we do 40,000 of those a month. Okay.
Wow.
So Courtney's been working there 8 years. She's in a very safe environment. She knows probably, if I had to say, 20 of the coworkers from a long time, some kindergarten, some 3rd grade. They all have fun together. They're treated well. They're respected. It's just a very safe, encouraging environment. Now, there are those people out there that are not fans of sheltered workshops, and their main argument is that my daughter does not get paid minimum wage. Now, I would argue with them that if you take the money that Courtney makes at Lafayette Industries and add to that her Social Security disability payment, those 2 payments together are close, very close to minimum wage. So my argument is I want a safe environment for our kiddos to work in, that they feel good about themselves. And there are workers that actually cry when they don't get to work. Okay.
Wow.
And if you look at our employment data, our average tenure is higher than a traditional employee. Our attendance is higher. And we've given out, I want to say, 65 gold watches for 25 years of service.
Wow. That is incredible.
Yeah, and the customers that we work for, we're doing outstanding work. We have the same quality standards for companies I've worked with, like Monsanto, and companies like that, and we hold ourselves to high standards and safety standards. So it's just a very, very positive work environment.
So when you say sheltered workshop, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, who might be watching, because a lot of people watch this who don't have a child or even a family member that would have any need for a sheltered workshop.
Sure. So we have workers of varying levels and varying diagnoses. And what we do is when we quote a job, an assembly job, we will quote that job based on prevailing wage, which right now is, I want to say, around $9 or $10 an hour. And we do a time study on that job of how long a typical person would take to do the work. And then what we do is we time study our workers and pay them on their productivity relative to a typical worker. So if Mary can do the same work at half the speed, she will get half that wage because she's producing half the amount of goods. I will tell you, we have some workers and some jobs that you and I could not and would not do for 6 hours a day, 4 hours for 5 days a week. So, some of our workers do very well. And I don't know where the term sheltered came from. I guess maybe because they're in a protected environment and they're never in a situation where they're alone with another person or worker. Okay.
Okay.
And Lafayette has a unique space at one of our facilities where we have a room where if somebody is specifically on the autism spectrum and they get emotionally off balance, we can bring them into this sensory room and play soft music and show pictures and calm them down and get them back to work without an event. And it's just really, really cool.
That is very cool. Yeah, I've heard of sheltered workshops before, but I had not heard of them having that specific type of room. So that's really amazing. Mm-hmm. So you said they have a 6-hour day or 5-hour day?
Because of regulations, they're limited. They generally start work at about 8 or 8:15 and then get off at about 2:45. So it's with breaks, it's a 6-hour day. Keeps them under the 40-hour work week is what it does.
Gotcha. And I know one of the people in my book, her son, James, is at a group home or a SILA. I don't know if those are interchangeable. I always get them mixed up. But he has, I believe it's a sheltered workshop as part of his way to keep him, like, make his money and pay his rent and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But you said that Courtney lives at home, correct?
Right.
So for the Lafayette Industries, is there a stipulation between? No,
there's no guidelines there. We have people that live in group homes. We have people that live with parents. We have people that live with guardians. So really no restriction. And, with a lot of folks with special needs, transportation is really challenging. So we have access to call a ride and ride share and different things. So there are accommodations, but I will tell you, if you're a parent with a child with special needs, it's another battle. You have to fight to arrange transportation.
Yeah, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the problem is these buses are basically picking up kiddos at their houses or where they live, and it's, if you think of it, it's like a small bus for maybe 6 to 8 kiddos, and it's expensive. So there are some funds out there, but it's just really limited what they can provide because of state funding and various funding sources. So you have to apply. It takes forever, and we are of decent means and have the ability, thanks to our jobs, to be able to get Courtney back and forth. So we're not gonna take that transportation potential away from somebody who really needs it, if you know what I mean.
Right. Right. And that is a huge downfall that I have seen, is the finances. Because I know for special education that when the first special education law was put into place, the government promised to pay 40% on top of what they were already paying schools, and they have never attained that. No. And that's for when they're in school. You mentioned that there are some funds available, but where do people even look for someone outside of the education system for their funding or for any kind of help? Is there like a directory or a
Yeah, I tell you, one of the best resources in St. Louis is St. Louis ARC, but they weren't even familiar with a program called HIP, HIPP, which in a nutshell, if you have a child that is Medicaid, is that the one?
I think so.
Yeah, eligible, and that child can be covered under your personal business insurance, the HIP program actually will pay you your whole family medical expense if you use your medical plan for your child. So,
oh, wow.
So every paycheck I send in my stub and it shows the medical charges, and they send me a EFT for, and that's called HIPP, HIP. And I don't know why they do it, how they figure it out, but
that's incredible.
So it goes back to my earlier comment. There are resources out there. It's just you have to have your friend network of families with kids with special needs, because there's just so many crazy things out there. We got, I'll call it, sued by Social Security. We have a trust for Courtney. The Social Security people changed the wording. Our trust allowed for deductions of travel expenses for Courtney, and they changed the law, and they started auditing trusts, and ours was the first one in Missouri they audited.
Oh.
First one. And so they wanted us to pay back all the Social Security since Courtney, like 5 years. So long story short, we had to find a lawyer. It took me 18 phone calls to find Debbie Champion, and Debbie represented us, and we went to a trial in Social Security, and she laid out what was going on, and the judge just shook her head and said, okay, and we won. But the point is, everything you go through is just a challenge. It's just really, you have to be thick-skinned. So I feel for people in our situation.
Yeah, and you're more in connection in the St. Louis community, where I am on the Illinois side. We're very rural. Yeah. And, St. Louis is quite a drive away from us, and to even access those opportunities, a lot of people don't have that. And I know that's the same way all across the country. It's not unique to this area, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I love that, they need to be connected as much as possible. And I also think that would help the family not feel so alone. Mm-hmm. Because I've heard that so many times from almost every family that I interviewed for the book, or that I work with, or that I've spoken to over the years, is that even though it's 1 in 26 families who has someone with a disability now, every family still feels alone, like nobody else knows what they're going through. And I think a lot of that goes back to what happened with your friend when Courtney was born, is because maybe family draws in closer, but friends and neighbors and church people and coworkers and whomever else had been in your circle before suddenly start to fall away.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, in our church, I know two two kids that ended up going into various physical therapy type roles because of Courtney. So, there's more positive than there is negative, and she's just a treasure and a dear, and wouldn't trade her for the world. I can tell you, I've seen a lot of kids that are typical that I'd rather have Courtney than those typical kids. So
yeah.
So
I can see that. And that's kind of something that I say in my book is, most of the students that I worked with in my teaching career had more empathy, more drive. They were often harder at work, to accomplish what they were accomplishing. And I know that's, I don't like to generalize, but it's kind of hard not to when almost everybody that I saw fit into all those mores. And, for our society to look at people who are disabled or special needs or learn differently or whatever is very sad. Our society is missing out on a lot.
Yeah. And it's important what you're doing. And it's great that you've written about it because, it's important that people in this situation, especially, I agree with the rural, I couldn't imagine, or even in the city, we're trying to start up a sheltered workshop in the city because in North St. Louis, there are, I think the number is 2,400 kids with special needs. And, you think it's tough in West County where we're pretty well off. I just can't imagine a family trying to deal with it in the city. And, it just so many more levels of complication. And I just couldn't imagine it. So, So thanks for the resources that you provide.
Well, you're welcome. And I'm very happy to do them. And I know that we need to get off of here because both of us have appointments after this. So I just want to, before we close out, I just want to give you an opportunity. If there's anything that you definitely wanted to say that we haven't said already, or any advice that you haven't already shared, is there anything left that you want to do? Just
have a good mate to do all this with, because it's tough to do it alone. And I've seen it pull families apart, and I've seen it pull families together. And thankfully, it's really strengthened the bonds in our family. So, and not just our small family, but the larger family. So, yeah, that's wonderful. Don, thank you so much for squeezing in this program today and being my guest. I so appreciate it. And thank you everyone who is watching, whether you're watching in the live with us or you're watching in the replay. I thank you so much for being here. I know that you have almost 1 million other opportunities for things that are available out there. And I so appreciate what you're doing by watching this program. Please share it. Please like it. Please tell your friends about it, because the more we can change, the better our world will be for all. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Keno, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Keno, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Keno is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykeno.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykeno.com, SHELLEYKENOW.